Nikki Fried is a former public defender, former state agriculture commissioner, and over the weekend she was elected as Florida's new state Democratic Party chair. Florida is extremely lucky to have her in that position, and taking over the party right now is no small feat after Florida Democrats experienced historic losses in the midterms. Going into 2024, I'm sure she'll be working closely with my co-host here, Robert Asencio, and many others as she rehabilitates that party. We recorded this interview prior to this weekend's election, so I want to give that as a background here. That being said, it was a fantastic conversation. Hope you enjoy the episode, and thanks for listening. I'm Brett.
I am Robert.
And this is the Democrat Serve Podcast.
Hey everyone, I'm Robert Asencio, your co-host on Democrat Serve Podcast. I'm with our executive director, Brett Broesder, who's also a co-host on this soon-to-be launched podcast. Today we have an honor and the privilege of interviewing Florida's past immediate former Commissioner of Agriculture, Nikki or Nicole Heather Fried. We commonly refer to her in the state of Florida. I think we're going to brand you as Nikki, the Nikki of the state of Florida. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me today.
So I hope I don't start out by disrespecting you, but I really would like to call you Nikki and let our audience feel who you are and who I've come to know as not just a public servant, but a friend and a promising star in Florida politics and the person that we need, not just in Florida politics, but national politics. Look, Nikki, you know what Democrat Serve is, what we do. Our mission is to help elect public servants, but we just talked about it offline, how important it is for people of public sector background, diverse backgrounds, to be elected to government office. So real quick about your background, you were the 12th person to ever be elected to the position of Commissioner of Agriculture in the state of Florida, but you're also the first female to have been elected to the that position. It's a governor's cabinet position. You were the only Democrat on that position in that cabinet during your time of service. You're an attorney by profession. You have a diverse background in practicing law. You've practiced criminal. You've practiced let's see here. Well, I'll let you talk about it, but let's talk about your public sector experience as it relates to public service, your your law background, and why you ran for that position. Tell us a little bit about the Department of Agriculture.
Yep. Well, that was like 10 million questions in one.
Yeah. It's all you.
Well, first of all, definitely call me Nikki. And so it's really great thank you for having me on. And you're absolutely correct. Getting more past, individuals who have served in other types of government roles and other government sectors is essential. You want always people that are in office to be well-rounded, to understand the nuances of serving. And that means, something that's deep ingrained in who I am and have always been is that when you're a public servant, it's to serve the public. And too many times you're getting a lot of elected officials, and it's on both sides of the aisle. To be candid, it's on both sides of the aisle that people decide to run for office because they like their names in lights. They like to have that pin that they can put on their lapel. They like to know that they can walk, into a building and have special treatment. All the wrong reasons why to serve. I'm sure there are some of those perks that are fun and exciting and interacting, getting to be on stage with President Biden. There's a lot of cool things, but at the heart of it, it's always because you should be serving the people. And that always has to be your number one goal and your number one job. And my career is all over the place. I, have not ever had a traditional career path by any stretch of the imagination. I started at the University of Florida. Actually, my service started way before that. I was vice mayor of my middle school. So my time goes back in the day. But when I went to the University of Florida, I did my undergrad, my master's, my law degree. I became the first female student body president at UF in almost 2 decades, another very old boy network. But really, that was one of those positions that really transformed a lot of who I am. Because being a student body president, it sounds like, oh, you're talking about high school, college politics. But UF being, one of the flagship universities of our nation, top 5 public institution, and diverse. You've got all walks of life, all backgrounds, people coming from all over the country and the world, different races, religions, ideology. And to be president of that, knowing that you had to work with all the different moving parts of our campus really opened my eyes in ways that I probably would never have done and seen if not for that experience. And then graduating from law school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And you'll actually really appreciate this. So I have a master's in campaigning also from UF. And I was graduating and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I've always known that I wanted to be in some type of public service of some capacity. So 2 things that I was doing. One, I actually applied for the Air Force JAG. And because, again, I really wanted to serve. But at the time, for whatever reason, they said, who is this girl from Miami? My grandfather had been in the Navy, but everybody, the greatest generation during World War II. And so they didn't accept me. I actually appealed it twice, long story. But during this whole process, Wesley Clark had gotten into the ring to run for president of the United States. And I thought that his background and having all of his stars would have been such a great opportunity for our country. And so I actually applied to run his Florida operations, and he didn't get very far in the primary. And so he never had a Florida operation. But anyhow, I finally got a job at a law firm called Holland & Knight, which is a very big commercial litigation firm, one of the largest in the country. I spent a year there and I hated every moment of it. Loved the people I was working with, loved Jacksonville, but I felt that's not why I went to law school. I didn't go to law school to be in my office 24 hours a day doing research and writing and carrying briefcases for the partners, not really making an impact. And so I left and I went to the public defender's office in Alachua County, which is Gainesville, back to where University of Florida home is, and was there for 4 years. And that really, outside of being student body president at UF, was really one of those life-altering moments, and just seeing another side of the criminal justice system, seeing the disparity and the inequities of our criminal justice system. And not even just that, but it goes even further into, why are we in this situation? I kept asking those questions. I can see the same client over and over again, which was frustrating as a public defender, that you work so hard for a case and then realize, okay, well, if we're going to fix this, let's go to the heart of what's wrong. So much of that is poverty, opportunities to succeed on economic opportunities weren't there. And so I always knew that if I ever wanted to make things better, I had to go to the heart of some of these issues. After a while, I left and went back down to South Florida, where my family is all from and where I'm from. And I worked in a firm that did protection of homeowners. It was during the foreclosure crisis. My dad had basically had done a lot of the closings for a lot of cases. And then we started seeing the spike of the foreclosures. And my dad said, come home, Nikki, we've got a problem here. The banks are taking these people's homes and we need a fighter in the courtroom. And so I came home and I did that. Eventually, my path goes all over the place, but eventually got into government consulting and was working for the Broward School Board, fighting for public education, working for our foster care kids in the state of Florida, giving them a right to counsel, and then fighting for the expansion of access for medical cannabis. And that's kind of what got me to where I am as running for commissioner. In the beginning part of 2018, I was at a marijuana conference and we're sitting around with a whole bunch of people from all across the country and said, why do we keep getting our butts kicked in Washington, D.C. when it comes to cannabis? And everybody kind of turned and looked at themselves and said, that's because we're going to have nobody coming from the industry that is running for office. You've got supporters, you got people, but no one who truly understands all the moving parts of the cannabis industry. And so the next morning I was brushing my teeth and I turned to my significant other and I looked at him and I said, I'm going to run for governor. And he had this, oh my God, look on his face, because he knows when I'm serious about something, like there's going to be a hard to move me away from it. But at the end of the day, made a decision to run for Commissioner of Agriculture because it really was something that brought all of my past into one basket because it's Commissioner of Agriculture and Consumer Services. So I got to do not only agriculture, which kind of on the cannabis space, on really seeing that hemp and cannabis was the future, future of agriculture, but it's also consumer services. So all the things that I've been fighting for my entire life on the consumer front fit into that. Also, we have oversee the food nutrition program. So my desire to help with poverty and to help people get out of that and to help children and learn by having nutritional food. I oversee the concealed weapons program, also a member of the cabinet. So I'm going to correct you, Robert, for a second. You said the governor's cabinet. It is not the governor's cabinet. It is the cabinet of the state of Florida. But there's 4 of us that sit on there, all independently elected.
I stand corrected.
So I spent 4 years really utilizing all of my passion projects for my whole life and being able to do that as commission, of course, a member of the Clemency Board as well. And so as a member of the Clemency Board, I got to take my time as a public defender and be able to use it to help people on the other end.
When it comes to being Commissioner of Agriculture, what was the most bizarre issue that you dealt with that you never thought you would deal with in that role?
African snails, these giant African snails that are the most disgusting things that you will have ever seen. They're the size of your hand. And they were brought in on African, basically, trade. And so sometimes they were like used as exotic pets. Sometimes some, religious organizations drink it as kind of potent, kind of voodoo stuff. But they are very dangerous for people to consume. They eat stucco. And so we have now gone through, there's been 3 eradications. We're on our 3rd eradication now, but that was probably one of those things that I was like, what am I doing here? But we eradicated, we have our own dog sniffers, like sniffing dogs that actually are trained to sniff out giant African snails. These FDACs, Florida Department of Agriculture dogs, have their own business cards. I mean, I think probably that is the most bizarre thing that I've had to deal with.
That's a fantastic answer. And so to back up a little bit, you decide to take on this endeavor of the statewide run. I'd imagine your significant other thought you were crazy doing it, but fantastic, and kudos to you for putting yourself out there. And in doing so, how did you start to break down putting together a campaign apparatus? What were some lessons learned, and what would you recommend to folks who might be wanting to do the same in the future?
Lots of lessons learned. And it's interesting. And I had an added advantage that most first-time candidates may not have. One, I had been doing government consulting in Tallahassee for almost 10 years. So I knew a lot of the players. I knew a lot of people already in the process. But I also have a master's in campaigning. So I'm not coming off completely from scratch of not knowing how to run an operation, but I had never run for anything of this kind of caliber. And so I started just asking questions to people who were already in office, who ran your campaigns, who were your campaign managers. And so my first hires were actually like my consultants which we can go into a whole nother soapbox about consultants in the state of Florida. But they then helped to put together the rest of the campaign team. And so the consultants came first, but my team in 2018 was 4 people. After the primary, I think we went to 6, but it was a very small team. It basically consisted of a campaign manager and a finance chair. And then myself, my 2 consultants, and then basically we did all the work. We traveled everywhere. We were on a very small, very strict budget. After the primary, we were able to bring on one more staffer and one more comms person, so a comms director. But we kept it still very small, and I think that's some of the lessons that you get learned a lot on campaigns, especially statewide campaigns. There's a lot of extra weight in campaigns, that, sometimes when you're in a small, and you're not raising money, or it's a small dollar campaign, that sometimes you have to be very lean. I just ran for governor, even in my governor's race, we were small but mighty. And as long as you have people that are in your camp that are completely committed to you, and this is what I've also said to my staff after my governor's run, I had an incredible team that all believed in what we were doing. We all believed in the mission. And what I said to them afterwards, because they all are talented, make sure you believe in your candidate. And so I think it's really important that when a candidate is running for office, to make sure that the people that they're hiring and the people that are on their staff believe in them. Because I can't tell you how many times, because again, I'm a different type of Democrat. I'm a different type of candidate. My dad is a diehard Republican for his entire life. I think I'm the only Democrat he has ever voted for. My mom is a diehard Democrat. She was a teacher for 25 years. And I think outside the box. I have friends on both sides of the aisle. I think very pragmatically. And so to have a lot of times you have Democratic consultants and Democratic campaign staff that very much want to put you in a certain box. This is how you win a primary. This is what you have to look like. This is what you have to say. This is your policy positions. And I fought with them a lot, because there's a lot of times where I was like, that's not me. That's not where I am on things. And we fought and we fought. And I said, look, at the end of the day, it's my name on the ballot. And I got to sleep at night. And if I don't believe in something, first of all, the voters are going to see through it, and they're going to know that my position is not genuine. And so I think that some of the things that people need to think about when they're hiring staff is make sure they believe in you and they're willing to listen to your voice. I can tell you that the first major issue that I had in 2019 with staff, once I was already elected, was a tweet that had been put out that we were dealing with the implementation of Amendment 4 here in the state, which was the restoration of civil rights. And the Republican legislature, were putting additional barriers, even though the people of our state wanted this and wanted it passed. And somebody from my comms shop tweeted that this is a modern day poll tax. That is a very drastic statement that got me into a lot of heat. And so I had to come in very strong and be like, this is a position that you've never heard me say. So, that you just took it on your own. And now I've got to go deal with the repercussions as I have to deal with this legislature and trying to pass other, priorities coming from the department. You put me in a really bad spot. But it's really important that you continue to maintain your voice, because at the end of the day, it's your name on the ballot. It's your name making those votes, and it's your reputation. They get to go and work on 15 million other campaigns. But it's you who has to make sure that you believe in what you're doing.
There's so much to Nikki Fried, right? That I keep, it's like an onion. I keep peeling and I see another layer of something that's a public servant, a businesswoman, a law practitioner. But let's see if for the context of this audience, right? So going back to your race for the executive branch cabinet member, I stand corrected again. Very well put. I'm going to beat myself over that one. So you ran against Matt Caldwell, who I served with in the Florida House. He was pretty much during a Republican legislative majority, state-led, Republican-dominated 3 branches of government. At that time, he was pretty much thought of as a shoe-in to become the next Commissioner of Agriculture. He was looking to succeed, which you did. Putman, right? Commissioner Putman, Adam. And then you run, and this lady beats the heir apparent and pretty much gets over 4 million votes. Talk about that real briefly, so we can talk about it. And the shift in landscape, because now there's no Democrat who has since competed for an election in the state of Florida that has garnered so many votes. Am I right? Let's talk about that.
We know that the down ballots especially the cabinet, don't get ever any attention. It's just everybody talks about the governor's races and the U.S. Senate race if it happens to be in the same election cycle. And so we knew we had to do a little bit different. We knew we broke apart the map. And we said, okay, we know that the party and the top of the ticket is going to be focused on a lot of the blue areas, turning out the blue vote. I can't make an impact in turning out the blue vote. But what I can do is go into some areas where we know that we might be able to lose by less. If we are going into the panhandle and we're consistently losing at 90%, we can't make up those votes in South Florida. But if we lose by 75%, that's a difference of a win or a loss. And so we broke down the state and focused on 17 different counties that we knew we had to spend time in physically, how to do our direct mail pieces, where we were buying our TV ads. And so we really kind of honed in on those specific counties that we knew we had to lose by less. The other thing was that I picked issues at the time and stayed very message disciplined and stayed disciplined on issues that really transcended partisan politics. Again, I'm not a typical Democrat. I didn't go to Democratic events my whole life. I've always been a Democrat since I was 17 years old, and I registered to vote. And I've always cared about those issues, but that just wasn't where my extracurricular activities was not involved in the party politics. And so, but I knew I had to pick issues that really kind of, talked to the masses, which is really what everybody should be doing. When you're putting together a campaign platform, you shouldn't be just talking to Republicans or Democrats. You should be coming up with a platform that really helps everybody. And so my platform was the 3 W's: weed, weapons, and water. So very easy. And also when you're on the stump, to remember which W's you've already gone through, it makes it a lot easier. Water, it was a time when we were seeing blue-green algae coming out of Lake Okeechobee, red tide on both the east and west coast. It was a time when a lot of the people, Republicans included, blamed Rick Scott for a lot of the environmental disasters, really put a lot of onus on the Republican legislature, who had passed some laws that really less restricted agriculture. And so it was an easy opportunity to kind of say, we're going to make some changes here inside the Department of Agriculture to fix our water quality. And that was able to pull a lot of Republicans that live on the coastal communities that just want somebody to protect their fishing and want to protect their home values that live on the water. When it comes to weed, I mean, that's what my background is, and making sure we are expanding the access to medical cannabis, bringing hemp into the state. That's something that, again, transcends partisan politics. It passed here in the state of Florida by over 71% of the vote. That's not a partisan issue. And the last was weapons, because unfortunately, Adam Putnam had dropped the ball in the concealed weapons program, and for 13 months didn't do background checks. And about 282 individuals have fallen through the cracks. And this is right after Parkland. And so there was a heightened awareness and sensitivity to gun issues. And so I was able to say, I promise I will make sure that we have complete and thorough background checks. The NRA will be kicked out of my office as they have too much power. Those are things that shouldn't be partisan. Everybody should agree. Yes, if you have a concealed weapons permit, you should have a background check. You should make sure that you're storing your gun safely. There's so many things that we can all agree upon. And I wasn't throwing bombs dealing with guns. It was very in my lane, things that people, no matter if you're Democrat, Republican, or independent, were able to agree with.
So, Nikki, can you tell me a little bit about your decision to run for governor?
Not an easy one. Not an easy one, because you're not making the decision alone. You have to make sure that you're talking to your family, you're talking to close personal friends, because you're going to be on the campaign trail and not spending as much time with the family, and certainly not going to every birthday party and missing holidays. So it's a personal sacrifice for sure to be on the campaign trail, and then if lucky enough to win office. But it's also making sure that it's the right time, and making sure that it was the right move for me, personally and professionally. And it was a hard decision. And knowing that we haven't won, the Democrats haven't won governorships for 30 years. And so it was a lot of, okay, can we do this? And at the end of the day, I'm somebody who I don't sit back. I watched what this guy, our current governor, has been doing to our state. as who he's marginalizing, the people who have been counted out because of his leadership. And so I knew that I had been in the trenches for 4 years with him. And if anybody understood how to take on Ron DeSantis, it was me. And that I needed to give the people of our state an option and an opportunity to say, these are the different types of leaders. You've got one that acts like a totalitarian zealot, who it's his way or the highway, or somebody who's willing to have a huge umbrella and make sure that you're listening to all sides of conversations and arguments and doing what was right for the people. And I went back and forth. I loved being Commissioner of Agriculture. Like, I loved every single moment of it. But I knew that there was a bigger problem on our hands and in the future of our state. And I knew that I had to take a run for it to at least give the people of our state an option of what they were looking for in their leadership.
So was he really autocratic when you guys had your cabinet meetings? And I know at one point he just said, "I don't want you there," right? And he just excluded you, totally disregarded the voters' will. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we all started, I always said when I first got there, I was hopeful. I really was. You have a cabinet, all four of us at the time, we're all under the age of 50, all with younger families. He called me the night before inauguration saying, looking forward to working together. I have known Ashley Moody, our attorney general, from undergrad and from law school and even practicing of law afterwards. I knew CFO Jimmy Petronis from his time in the legislature. And I was like, oh, hey, this is going to be okay. We're going to figure this out. He's okay on some of the issues that I was fighting for. I saw even the first 6 months, he came to a lot of my positions on pardoning of the Groveland Four, which were four young African-American boys who had been wrongfully accused of raping a young girl. 3 had been killed along the way of the court programs. The sheriff had killed 2 of them. On and on and on. He came to that position to me that we need to pardon them on dealing with smokable flour. And so I was hopeful. We all took a trip to Israel together at this trade mission in 2019. And then he started getting the chatter in his ear. She's going to run against you. She's going to run against you. And so he started to find ways to exclude me from conversations. The first real big fight we had was in 2019 when he tried to appoint somebody in the cabinet for one of our agency heads, and all the cabinet members all kind of like lockstep within 15 seconds moved to approve, which that's never, that means they had conversations behind closed doors. And I walked out of the cabinet meeting because I felt that they broke sunshine laws. And that kind of started the rotation. And then 2020 came. And 2020 came, they started trying to take power away from the Department of Agriculture. I actually called him in beginning part of 2020. And I said, Ron, I think you and I need to sit down and talk. Like, I think that you're getting some really bad intel and information about what's going on here. And he's like, sure. Just have your staff talk to my staff and let's put together a calendar and let's sit down. Well, my staff called and his staff is like, well, what is it about? And my staff was like, they're members of the cabinet. Like, what are you asking Ashley's team what the meeting is about? They just want to talk. And so we never got that on the books. And then came COVID. I called as well to numerous times to both the governor and his chief of staff at the time saying, let's do this together. We don't know what's in front of us. People are going to need calm leadership and us to work together. They're going to want to see us doing that. I never received a single phone call back from either one of them. And that's when the relationship completely ended. And unfortunately, he continued to cancel cabinet meetings. I didn't get invited to, it's silliness, but, Space Coast launches, the rest of the cabinet's there and I'm not there. And so it was really just insulting at this point, because you're right. The people of our state wanted a split government. They voted for this. They intentionally voted split voting on this ballot. And it was unfortunate. I still have a decent relationship with Ashley in regards to some policies, not really anymore necessarily on her policies, but, behind closed doors, we would still talk about what is happening in your office on COVID and when are you opening the offices. CFO Petronis and I still worked a lot together when it came to firefighting, because he has one part of the firefighting. He deals with the with all the fires, on kind of the buildings and structures, and I deal with forestry fires. So there was a lot of synergy on work to be done. But it was his way or the highway. And so we started canceling cabinet meetings, clemency meetings, and the most petty aspects of things. Every single year, the Commissioner of Agriculture donates Christmas trees to all members of the cabinet. We get them, donated to us from one of our pine tree growers in the state. We give out the trees, and then we have a lighting ceremony where I present the tree to the governor. The first lady always supposed to put up some lights, and it's a big, celebration. He stopped doing those. It's like, it's Christmas. Like, this has nothing to do with partisan politics. But refused to accept our trees. This year he accepted the tree, but would not do a ceremony with us. But wow. petty stuff that is just silly.
So Brett, I don't know if you know, but the Space Coast and the launches are a big thing. I'm going to tell you, Commissioner, that I have been to a number of those, and just the revenue that the Space Coast generates for the state of Florida is massive. So to exclude any cabinet member, anyone that has a say in policy, is just a big mistake. So short-sighted. So how large, for people's perspective, is the Department of Agriculture, Florida's Department of Agriculture, budget-wise and staff-wise?
Budget-wise, it's a $2.1 billion department. Most of that money actually comes for food nutrition programs. So we are the pass-through and the coordination of all of our school nutrition meals, as well as all of our food banks. But we also oversee, pass-throughs on a lot of the energy grants, of things of that nature. But it's a $2.1 billion agency. The department itself has about 4,600 employees all across the state of Florida. And our hands are involved in almost every single aspect of people's lives. So it's a pretty important, I always call it a mini governor's office, because that's how many different aspects we actually touch throughout the entire state.
And Nikki, so kind of going back to the campaign trail, you decided to jump in for the governor's race, and it's a competitive primary. Can you talk a little bit about the dynamics there? I mean, look, I tend to think competitive Democratic primary is always healthy, specifically in the situation that you're facing going up against Ron DeSantis. But yeah, if you could tell me a little bit about the dynamics there and the decision making around that.
Yeah. I think that typically, yes, primaries are good. You get to see the good, the bad, the ugly, get people organized. In this case, it was never going to be good. I had always consistently said, when you're dealing with an incumbent, no matter to what capacity, when you're dealing with an incumbent, to be able to get your act together sooner than later is always going to be more beneficial. And I said this, that the second that there was a primary, I said, we're going to lose, because Florida's primaries are the end of August. To be able at the end of August, to be able to turn right back around, bring everybody together, start fundraising all over again, when you're especially up against somebody who's sitting on $150 million, a popular governor, and we're just, getting our act together. Yet 10 weeks is never going to be enough to be a unified front. And so that was really hard, and I felt very, it was difficult. It was difficult knowing that I was running in a primary, knowing how much work that I had been doing for those 4 years.
I'm sorry, 2018, lessons learned. That's what actually cost the governor's race for the Democrats, pretty much, was that 8-week period that was between the primary and the general, right?
We lost 3 weeks. I mean, you know this, Robert, that right after the primary, what we call a coordinated campaign here, where you're supposed to, at this point, fold in the candidates' campaigns with the party, with a separate apparatus called coordinated. There was 3 weeks where there was nothing happening, because no one anticipated Andrew Gillum to take that primary. And so many people were getting ready for, either Gwen Graham or Philip Levine. And so once that all was over, getting everybody up and ready, and we're like, oh, wait a second. And he had no money, and being able to turn that apparatus around costs us, 3 weeks on the ground with no apparatus up and running is devastating in a general election. And unfortunately, that's what happens after these primaries. We just don't have a good enough infrastructure in the Democratic Party here in Florida to really be able to flip those campaigns over to a statewide coordinated instantaneously.
So is that what happened? I'm sorry, Brett, I just wanted to ask one follow-up question. Is that what really happened? The infrastructure just fell apart? Because it's more than just 8 weeks that caused us to lose as many races and as badly as we did the governorship and strictly up and down the ballot. What happened? What's going on?
It was everything, Robert. It was that the Democrats had not registered voters. There had been no real voter registration apparatus in the state, pockets here and there. But we used to have a 700,000 vote advantage during Obama years. That wasn't too long ago. And now we're down 150,000. A lot of people could become independents, that a lot of the college kids that their first registering became NPAs. We all know that after Hurricane Maria, a lot of Puerto Ricans came to the state of Florida and became not Democrats, but independents. And we never did the work on the ground to really, explain to them why they should be registered Democrats. They can't get involved in primaries. It was the coordination between the Senate victory and House victory. It was no grassroots. We hadn't been door knocking since 2018 because 2020 we had the pandemic. We lost ground on that grassroots, on that persuasiveness. We let so much of the messaging that who we were as Democrats stuck, and there was no no messaging to counter that. And look, and I've been very open about this too. Everywhere else in the country, we were able to fend off a red wave. And that's because two things happened across the country. The youth came out and voted because they were scared for democracy, and women rallied around Roe coming down. Here in the state of Florida, our gubernatorial candidate was close to 70 and had been pro-life for all of his life. And so there just wasn't that same energy that we had seen across the country. And unfortunately, when you don't have that same energy at the top of the ticket, the energy loses on the bottom of the ticket. I mean, when I was walking all across the state and talking with candidates, including you and including others from around the state, it's congressionals, House, Senate, and they're all telling me, Nikki, I don't know what to do. Charlie is polling 10 points below me and is dragging us down. That is heartbreaking to know that these local candidates were working so hard, and no matter how hard they worked, no matter how much money they raised, no matter what a great candidate they were, or what their platform was, that at the top of the ticket wasn't pulling its weight. There was no way for the bottom of the ticket, House seats, Senate seats, congressional seats, city and county commission seats, school board seats, were going to be able to win. So it was a complete, utter failure. There was no excitement. There was no messaging. To this day, I don't know what our message was in this midterm election, and that had a drastic impact. A 19-point loss, which is the largest Democratic loss in the history of the state of Florida. For the first time since the 1800s, there is not a statewide elected Democrat in Florida. There is a supermajority in the House and in the Senate, and a complete domination by one individual. And that is not democracy.
Consolidation of 3 branches of government.
Correct. Into one person.
Wild. So, Nikki, what do you think needs to happen moving forward to turn things around?
I think that Democrats in Florida need to have a gut check. Who are we? What are we doing? It's everything. It is from infrastructure. It is working with our local clubs and our caucuses on teaching them how to do grassroots again, making sure we're doing voter registration, we're recruiting candidates. And I keep telling the Democrats of Florida, God helps those who help themselves. We're not going to get somebody from across the country to come in and save us. We got to start figuring this out on our own. And some of the problems that we have here is personality conflicts. There are so many people within our party, because we have been losing for so long, that everybody's grasping onto their own little, and I call this perceived power. And that I say this, and I know Robert's heard me say this and used this before, that the Democrats in Florida would rather be the king of the kingdom of one than the prince of a kingdom of a million, because they don't like to share power. And again, it's perceived power. And until we start to figure out that we need to be electing Democrats, stop this high school nonsense that is happening inside the party and start working together, lifting people up. So it's everything from grassroots, it's everything from fundraising to voter registration to candidate recruitment, and to strategy, to messaging. When you've got one pocket messaging solely about, abortion, and the polling is coming back saying here in this part of our state, that's not their number one issue. The number one issue is the economics. And then we're not talking about that because Democrats for too much and too long always want to believe that they're right on policy. And so they're going to argue to death with you that they are right, instead of listening to the people that say, wait a second, I care about this issue, but I care about paying for my property insurance, and I care about making sure that my kids are safe in their school. We're not talking about the issues that are impacting the people of our state. We're talking about the issues that we want to talk about, and that is never going to be a winning equation.
What are you looking to do next?
A lot. If you can see from my passion, I'm not done. I'm not done serving the people of our state. So I'm working on kind of a couple of fronts. First off, Ron DeSantis can never be president of the United States. He is the most dangerous person in politics in our lifetimes. The things that he is doing, the power grabbing that he is undertaking, is not what democracy was built on. And we are in a state right now where he is changing the protest laws inside the Capitol. The whole reason why the First Amendment exists is so that you can protest your government. He's changing those rules. We have schools all over the state of Florida who have no books in their libraries, taking away professors' abilities to teach classes, telling our universities how to be governed in the classroom. There are so many things that he is doing. So my priority and a lot of my attention is going to be how to make sure the rest of the country knows what's happening here in Florida. The nation understands and knows the Don't Say Gay bill. They know about the migrant flights. They know about the fight with Disney. But all the other moving parts and all the things that every single day that he's chipping away at actual freedoms and actual democracy, the nation needs to hear about. And so part of things that I'm going to be working on is making sure that we're creating content from Florida that could then be utilized across the nation, hopefully to be picked up by even Republicans in the primary, and say, this is not the guy that you want, running for president, and to work on making sure that he is not the candidate that comes out of the Republican primary. So I'm working a lot with some national groups, Blessings from the White House on this program, a kind of a war room calm shop is one aspect. Two, if we are ever going to win Florida back, we've got to fix the party. And I know I hear a lot of times go around the party, it's not fixable, but we got to fix it. And we've got to make sure that, everybody says, don't waste your time because it's never fixable. Well, at some point, somebody's got to come in and fix it. And so we're spending a lot of time figuring out what that looks like, how I can be helpful, how I can utilize my experiences to kind of steer the Democrats of Florida into the right direction. Those are kind of some of the things that I'm working on. There's some private stuff that I'm kind of consulting on, but these are really where my projects are. And I actually just got added onto a board yesterday, a nonprofit organization whose purpose is to stomp out poverty in Palm Beach County by 2050. And so I've come on board to kind of help and to utilize my connections and resources to work on some aspects of that, and some of it's financial literacy, but truly trying. So those are kind of some of the projects that I'm working on. But I'm trying to figure out how to save democracy in Florida and across the country.
Book banning or censoring. What are your thoughts? What's going on?
This is bad. This is really bad. Look, there are so many books out there that have different perspectives. It's important that you hear everything and you learn everything. If you're taking books off shelves because you don't agree with their philosophies, that's you censoring somebody else's viewpoint. And just like we don't want books banned, this cancel culture on the other side is in the same respect. You got to be able to allow people to read what they want to read. And more so, like if a kid wants to learn about something, they're going to pick up their damn phones and their laptops, and they're going to go Google it. They're not going to be prevented from learning and listening to what's happening out here. Look, this is what happened. And I'm, from of the Jewish faith. I spent a significant amount of time growing up learning about the Holocaust, and not saying that we are going that direction by any stretch of the imagination, but there were steps that were taken at the front end that scapegoated the Jewish community, that tried to marginalize communities. And one of those action items was banning books. And that is not how we get through a civil society. And this is dangerous. And I'm hearing from teachers all over the state. In fact, a teacher yesterday I was speaking to said that her middle school child, they just had a book fair last week, and 75% of the books that had been on the book fair's list from the previous year were not out there because they hadn't had time to review the list and they had not been approved. It's bad. And it's, that's not what democracy is about.
Constitutional carry, or also known as permitless carry, how dangerous is it to the state of Florida?
We are not calling it constitutional carry. Okay. They call it
Well, that's why I say it's permitless. They call it, that's the title, it's constitutional carry, but really it's permitless carry.
Dangerous. So as somebody who just oversaw the concealed weapons program, the last 2 fiscal years of my administration, we denied over 11,000 applicants. Florida has the largest concealed program in the country. We've got 2.1 million individuals that are on the program, and we denied 11,000 over the last 2 fiscal years. All of those individuals that we denied, and it's all based on background checks. I don't have a lot of discretion on those. So for Republicans think, oh my God, she denied 11,000. It's statutes that you all wrote that I just had to follow. And so all 11,000 of those people would be able to carry concealed without a permit and without training. And that's really dangerous too, that somebody hasn't, they can have their gun in their glove compartment, in their purse, never have shot it before, never truly have aimed it. And now they're going to hurt themselves before they hurt anybody who is a perpetrator and attacking them. Very dangerous, and very dangerous for law enforcement. Law enforcement has already said when they're going into a situation and they see 2 individuals that are armed, they don't know who the good guy and who the bad guy is. They're going to shoot and ask questions later. And so I've asked a lot of our gun, violence protection groups to really start putting out some of the statistics of other states that have gone in this direction to say, does this actually help with safety, or are you starting to see an increase in violence and gun violence in your states? Because my guess is that you are seeing an increase in gun violence in those states that have either gone to complete open carry, which is different. Open carry means that you don't have to conceal it, that you can be walking around the streets with your AKs, and you can just putting your gun on your belt and no big deal, like Western movies. Still, permitless carry is you can carry it concealed without a permit, but very dangerous. And that's coming from law enforcement, as well as just the practicality of the situation.
And so when it comes to water in Florida being such a major issue, I always find it fascinating. Folks who have done campaigns across the country and end up doing work in Florida are always really surprised by how water is the predominant issue. I throw that to both of you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. First of all, it's the lifeblood of any, regardless. But when you have such a tourist economy that is reliant on our beaches, that is reliant on, we have the most magnificent springs that people travel all across the country to come to scuba dive in, to snorkel in, to bring their family to. That's really important. And then, of course, our drinking water. Lake Okeechobee, we've got, is also one of the major wonders of our country. And it is part of who we are as our own way of life in Florida. Everybody has, not everybody, but a good portion of our state have boats, regardless of the size of them. They go out and they fish. They take their kids out fishing. And it's a lot of our economics on the coastal communities is built around these fishing communities that bring the charters back in, and then they supply the fish to the hotels and to the local restaurants, and that brings more tourists in. So much of our economy is based on our environment. And without clean water, both from a drinking perspective, but also for enjoyment of life, people aren't going to come here. And so it is a tremendous part of who we are as Floridians.
Water is life. Bottom line, it's our economy, it's our survivability, it's our sustainable way of life. But you mentioned it before, 2014, 2015, the legislature led by the Republicans reduced the thresholds, contaminant thresholds allowable for water. That means that it allowed industries to continue to dump into Lake Okeechobee in our waterways, which then ultimately resulted in the blooms of the algae blooms and tides, red tides, although that's another phenomenon, but nevertheless, the conditions that have made our water less than desirable. We don't know what the long-term effects are because this is a recent phenomenon within the last 10 years, right? So we have the potential here of having lasting long-term effects. We know that at Biscayne Bay, the waterway, the Everglades, the Miccosukee Indians have told me personally they can't survive on the land if they were to try to survive on the land for 7 days a week, but sustainable through food, nutrition, water consumption. They would probably perish. Their lifespan would be less reduced by significantly because of the lead in the water and the other contaminants. And then we know that on Biscayne Bay we've had a lot of fish that they just resulted what they call the fish kills, where fish just all of a sudden overnight or during the day, they wind up dead floating throughout the bay. So it is a very dangerous thing. Nikki, I congratulate you for having fought that and filed a lawsuit against Georgia for our waterways, but our control of our water and making sure that we have pure water. I want to ask you a question, though, and I think this is really, really important. This is probably one of my last questions because I think it's one of the most important questions that we can ask any public official, certainly somebody who wanted to be the next governor, should be the next governor. What do you tell the Floridians who are hurting, who are been sold a bag of goods, been told that the Republicans are going to fix the economy, that the Democrats are the ones that have caused the problem, the economic hardships that are resulting in the inflation? What do you tell the citizens of the state of Florida? Give us some hope.
Look, Robert, I've actually had to have a lot of those conversations across the state. I'm continuously being asked to come onto Zooms of lots of our clubs and our caucuses and Democratic organizations with what is the game plan? Knowing that we can't stop all the atrocious legislation that is going to come through in the next couple of years. And so what I have said to them consistently, look, we know history of our, not just the country, but of the world, the pendulum always swings. That the pendulum is swinging right now so far right that it is not even, it's even outside of Republican platform, that it is so extreme in this direction. It is going to come back, and we've got to be ready for it. We've got to make sure that we are ready with their platforms, their organizations, and we can't just sit back and just watch. We got to make sure that we're starting to organize. And in fact, I was on a Democratic Women's Caucus Zoom last evening, and this is what I've said to them, is their main issue that they wanted to talk to me about was the permitless carry. And I said, look, you've got all of our different activist groups. You've got, the groups that are solely focused on gun prevention, whether it's Moms for Demand Action, Everytown, Giffords, March for Our Lives. Then you've got our groups that are Planned Parenthood, that are focused on, protection of a woman's right to choose. And then you've got our civil rights groups, our NAACPs, our urban leagues. We continue to be siloed on our issues. And so if you are constantly just bringing people to Tallahassee only talking about your issue, we can't beat them like that. There's still more of us than there are of them. And it is time for us to start uniting around a general principle and a general philosophy of protecting freedom and democracy. That's why so many people, have literally lost their lives defending the fundamental principles of who we are as Americans. And so we got to go back down to our core. And we also have to recognize we have a bad brand here in Florida. Democrats have a very bad brand. Take this time to start talking to your neighbors, talking to your Republicans, talking to your NPAs, hearing what's on their agenda, and start talking through, we agree with you. We agree with you. Come with us and let's fix these issues. It's going to be hard. I mean, it's heartbreaking when I'm talking to gay parents who are saying that they're leaving the state of Florida, or that they're raising a gay child and their child is consistently getting beaten up in school, or you're a member of the African American community here and you're being told that your history is not relevant from our governor. And all I can say is we're stronger together, and that there's so many people that share in your frustrations and share in it. Start making an impact to local level. Go back home, go work on your school board races, go work on your city and county commission races, start helping us build that bench. There is hope and there is promise. None of us are giving up. None of us are giving up. And we are going to continue to be here to make sure that when the pendulum swings back, because it will, always the last part of a pendulum swing is the judiciary. And so we have reached that. The pendulum is going to have to start swinging back. And we even saw that in the midterms. We saw that the rest of the nation rejected this MAGA philosophies. They rejected this attack on democracy. And we got to make sure that what happened around the rest of the nation comes here to Florida and we take back our state. And I don't mean like Democrats. I just mean civility. Civility and common sense and rational people start to govern again. I mean, when I was student body president, Jeb Bush was our governor. I talked to him all the time. We obviously don't agree on a lot of things, but there was communication. Even I speak to Rick Scott all the time. There's communication between us because we care about our state. What is happening right now is not normal, and this pendulum will swing. There's enough of us working on it, and we're going to come together and fix this.
Love it. Hey, and Nikki, can you tell me a little bit about where you are right now and about your grandmother?
I am physically in my mother's house. So in West Palm Beach, over in Boynton, I'm on the University of Florida Law School Board of Trustees, had a trustees meeting last week. And I decided to kind of stay here to see family and friends this week. And so my mother is very happy, continues to want to feed me. That's also the Jewish mother in her, and making sure she continue every day. I'm doing a load of laundry. You want your stuff in there? I'm like, Mom, I'm good. I'm good. But that is the awesomeness of being home every once in a while, even as an adult. So getting that motherly love and affection and pretending that you're still a high school kid.
Oh, it's fantastic. Well, I don't want to take up any more of your time, Nikki, and I'm going to kick it. And thank you so much for being on. I'm going to kick it to Robert to take us out.
Well, we can't thank the former Commissioner of the State of Florida, Department of Agriculture, Nicole Heather Fried, also known as Nikki Fried. She spent the last hour with us speaking in detail and sharing some deep thoughts. But at the end of the day, it's up to public servants like her to ensure that we have better government, right? Because those are the people who are running for office. Those are people who will contribute to assist those that are running for office. And it was a pleasure to speak with you. Look forward to speaking to all. See you next time.